Hello, everyone. 241 session of Owl's Freedom Teachings. I'm Julian Katari, and I'm here to present you with Blue Heron Woman, who has done a research for this session about what is the most important, how your morning determines your day, and some other info about how the day brings about health, the different things, cycles, activations of the different parts of the body, how they work along with the sun, our grandfather's sun. So welcome everyone to Owl Freedom Teachings, and this is going to be on conversation. So how do we kick this off?
Well, we're starting with your morning decides how fast you age.
Okay.
After the age of 30.
Okay. Is it okay? Yeah.
So at 30, your body forgives the mornings when you skipped water first, grabbed a coffee, sat at a desk, and ate nothing till noon. And your body systems all compensated for that on their own. Your vagus nerve carries signals at full capacity, firing the gastrocolic reflex from coffee alone. Your insulin response cleared a glucose spike in minutes, and the fascia between every muscle layer liquefied during sleep without a single conscious movement because the lubricant was abundant and the overnight cooling was not enough to get it beyond what a few steps could reverse.
So this is to say that having coffee first thing in the morning is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
My body tells me that naturally. It's like, don't do that.
I had heard from Andrew Huberman, the neuro guy, that after your cortisol awakening response, your body needs to expend the ATP, the adenosine in it before you have coffee. So for over 2 years now, I have not had coffee till I have spent my 20 minutes in the blue lit rich light of sunrise.
Yeah.
Before that, I only have water.
Yeah.
Because once, like we heard last week with the sleep, once coffee binds to those adenosine receptors, it can't. And spiritual teachers are about money, that are saying money is just energy, are teaching to a practice to, okay, you get $1 today, you got to spend it all. And that's what your body needs to do with adenosine. But money's not energy. But yes, our body needs to expend it all. And if we don't expend it before we put new caffeine on it, that causes grogginess in the afternoon, a drop.
Okay. Yeah, totally.
So, and that can be a whole nother discussion. But yeah, coffee first thing before water in the morning is
bad.
Is bad. Not so good. Okay. After 30, especially.
Okay.
So, and at 30, your bones maintain their architecture from walking forces alone, and the crystalline lens of your eye passed every wavelength of morning sunlight straight through to your retina without filtering it. And you never noticed any of this because forgiveness is totally silent. After 50, all of those systems run at a lower baseline. The vagus nerve has lost signaling capacity that accumulated across decades. The insulin response has slowed. The post-eating spike of blood sugar climbs higher and lasts longer with each passing year. The fascia gets thicker because the lubricant that keeps it fluid is declining in proportion. The bone lost density without mechanical forces. The bones lose density without the mechanical forces that most people's morning routine does not provide. The crystalline lens in our eyes yellowed, filtering the blue wavelengths that our circadian clock depends on before they reach the cells that detect them. And this all arrives as gradients. That forgiveness and the forgiveness stopped. Right? So the morning that ran itself at 30 requires specific inputs that at 55 that activate compensatory mechanisms that can still operate at full capacity. So at 30, it ran by itself without us paying attention to the inputs. Now, after 55, for sure, we must pay attention to these inputs. So there's 6 input, 6 systems that have declined, and 6 compensations that will work still if they receive the right signal in that first hour. So, first one, what happens when cold water reaches an empty stomach before anything else? Well, the cold moves downward, settling, and the bowel movement arrives within 30 minutes, more reliable than any coffee or fiber or anything else could do in the morning.
Okay.
Why? Well, the physics begin with a receptor in the stomach lining that is a cold sensing ion channel, and it opens when liquid between 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, which would be 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, or lower, contacts the mucosal surface of the stomach. The channel then opens, calcium ions flow in, and the signal travels up through the vagus nerve, the rest and digest signal, right? That opens everything up, that relaxes everything, to the brainstem. And simultaneously, stretch receptors in the gastric wall detect the volume of water in the stomach. And so that also sends a signal up the vagus nerve. And these 2 signals, one is thermal, one is mechanical, they arrive through a shared nerve simultaneously, and they provide a multimodal report in the brainstem, which gives parasympathetic output to the colon that is disproportionately larger than either signal alone could generate. The reflex is strongest after an overnight fast because the gastric stretch receptors have been resting for 7 to 8 hours. And so that first distension after silence produces the largest signal of the day. So cold water delivers 2 inputs through one nerve at once. The cold receptor amplifies a nerve signal that has been weakening for a long time or waiting for a long time. And vagal tone actually declines by about 1% per year after 30, and by 65, age 65, 35% of the peak capacity is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how would we tone our vagus nerve? By doing yoga nidra meditations consistently, bringing ourselves, once we hit 40, for sure, out of sympathetic response into parasympathetic as much as possible. So then the gastrocolic reflex weakens and morning regularity becomes unpredictable. The receptor, however, does not decline because ion channels rebuild through normal cellular turnover on a time scale of days. The receptor is as responsive at 65 as it was at 30. So when cold water activates it, the strong receptor compensates for the weakened nerve. Warm water stretches the stomach, so warm tea first thing in the morning, stretches the stomach and fires the volume signal alone, but the cold water fires 2 signals. Cold water on an empty stomach also addresses 2 overnight accumulations that converge in a single morning window. Fasting stomach acid is at its daily peak concentration, which is a pH of 1 to 2. The most concentrated it will be at any point in the next 24-hour cycle. A pH of 1 to 2, anybody who's listening of stomach acid, that's battery acid. It'll burn you in a heartbeat. That's acidic as acidic can be. So it's at its highest point that it will be in the next 24-hour cycle, and the mucosal barrier in the stomach is at its thinnest. So here we have that yin-yang effect, right? The pH is highest, the mucosal barrier is thinnest. So there are 2 extremes. Cold water dilutes the acid and begins simultaneously to induce the thickening of the mucosal barrier of the stomach before coffee arrives to challenge that barrier. At the same time, blood has thickened to its 24-hour maximum, and we lost 300 to 500 milliliters of water during the night through breathing and evaporation that concentrated our blood. So the thickness of the blood peaks at waking, and this is why heart attacks and strokes typically tend to happen early in the morning, because the blood is thick and it clots easily. So it's a meeting of the cortisol awakening surge, which is a sympathetic response that makes the blood clot more readily, and the thickened blood is right there to clot really readily.
Okay.
So cold water reaches through the small intestine and passes into the bloodstream to dilute it within 15 to 20 minutes of drinking it. 1 glass, refrigerator temperature, doing amazing work. The receptor in the stomach fires regardless of age because the protein rebuilds every few days. So, next, what about a system where the receptor works perfectly and the barrier between the signal and the receptor has changed with every year? What happens when morning light reaches a retina that is aged? Well, in the retina, there is a population of cells, which we've talked about several times, that do not contribute to vision. They detect light, not images. They were discovered in 2002 and operate as a system with a single purpose: to measure the composition of light and relay that to the circadian clock in our brain. So when melanopsin, which is contained in these cells, detects sufficient blue wavelength light, the circadian clock triggers the cortisol awakening response and initiates the circadian phase for the day. Every peripheral clock in the body then locks onto this morning signal, and all depend on it for the next 16 hours. The strength and timing, that's what they depend on, the strength and timing of the single input through the retina. The cells don't age. What changes is the lens that accumulates yellow chromophores that stiffen collagen and don't allow the lens to bend as it's supposed to, right? So that lens filters blue wavelength selectively, so the filter has changed and does not activate melanopsin as easily anymore. So indoor light does not activate melanopsin ever at any age. When the morning calibration is weak, every downstream clock shifts. Okay, next, stiffness in the morning comes from a state change of the lubricant called high hyaluronic acid. High hyaluronic acid is a specialized molecule that our fascia secretes between its layers along every gliding surface in the body. And that has gelled overnight by the same physics that makes ketchup solid in the bottle and liquid when you shake it. You know how to you got to shake it to get the ketchup to come out, right? Mm-hmm. Movement during the day generates intrafascial shear that keeps the lubricant fluid. But by age 60, the high hyaluronic acid production has declined, so there's less lubricant to begin with. To compensate, our body needs 60 seconds of gentle oscillation, like hip circles, torso twists, gentle swaying side to side, back and forth, right? To liquefy the gel, to melt the gel before stretching. So you must melt first and then you stretch. Because if you stretch without melting, you're doing more damage. Okay, next, what about the piezoelectric force? Let's consider the jaw. That we use 3 times a day. That has not worked against real resistance in most people at age 60 for a long time. Because the food that arrives to us at every meal has been pre-softened, pre-cut, and pre-processed to the point where the masseter muscle, this muscle right here, that is the strongest muscle in the body relative to its size, is generating only 10 to 20 pounds of force when it can realistically generate 100. So the mandible is a piezoelectric bone, as are all the bones in our body. Mechanical compression generates electrical charge in the hydroxyapatite crystals embedded in the bone matrix. And then the piezoelectric charge directs the osteoblasts to deposit new bone. along lines of maximum stress. So chewing hard food at 100 pounds pressure or more of bite force stimulates that signal. By 60, in most of us, our jaw muscle, the masseter, has atrophied from decades of soft food, and mandibular bone density has declined as well, which causes teeth to loosen. Each tooth lost removes about 1,000 pressure sensors that are embedded around the root of the tooth. Those sensors detect bite force and relay it to the hippocampus through the trigeminal nerve. When a tooth is extracted, those receptors are lost permanently, and the nerve that loses the signal decreases proportionately. So the relationship, let's state this very clearly, the relationship between tooth loss and cognitive decline is dose dependent on how many teeth you lose.
Okay.
So the more teeth you lose, the more risk you have of dementia. Every tooth lost adds to the dementia risk. But forceful chewing drives the hippocampal blood flow and stimulates BDNF, the growth factor that supports neuron maintenance and new cell survival through the trigeminal nerve. So chewing mastic gum for 3 minutes, alternating sides while you're making your coffee, before you even drink your coffee, after you've drunk your cold water, and then your hip twists and your torso, gentle oscillations to loosen up the fascia, to liquefy the fascia. Then you stick a piece of mastic gum in your mouth and chew it for 3 minutes while you're alternating sides while you're making your coffee. Provides that electropiezo stimulus to keep your teeth in your mouth and yourself chewing. Okay, next is the loss of muscle. Muscle protein synthesis requires the amino acid leucine to cross a concentration threshold that activates the switch for initiating new protein assembly in muscle fibers. At age 30, only 15 grams of protein at breakfast crossed that threshold easily. The concentration reached the activation switch and the muscles began building new fibers within hours of the meal. At age 50, that threshold for leucine rises. The leucine concentration required to activate the switch rises with age. So 15 grams of protein barely registers in the body at age 60. This is why 60-year-olds lose muscle like crazy. The pathway still functions, it just needs more leucine, more protein. So breakfast that crosses the leucine threshold flips the switch, and now new protein is being formed, adding more fibers to the muscles. And that process runs for 3 to 5 hours before leucine concentration decreases. So the muscle built during that window is the only muscle that the body adds from that meal. So what is morning routine that slows aging? Well, 1 glass of refrigerator cold water first thing. And you know what's interesting about this is I have a water filter that sits on my countertop. And during the winter, I don't have heat during the night, so the water in that filter gets really cold and on into spring. So yes, with my morning walk and with that first cup, because like I said, I've been drinking water first thing. In fact, typically I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning and that's what I want. So I go and get cold water at 3 o'clock in the morning for one thing. And then again, when I first get out of bed, that's the first thing I do before I even feed the kitties is I get that cold water. But as soon as the temperature got hot enough that my house is hot and I don't run the AC at night because it doesn't work anyway, right now, it just quit. So right now, all it's doing is keeping my house from getting super hot. It doesn't cool it. So as soon as that stopped, I noticed that the regularity decreased. So sunrise, so first 1 glass of refrigerator cold water first thing, then sunrise sunlight for 20 minutes, 60 seconds of hip and torso rotations, gentle sway, chewing mastic gum for 3 minutes while making coffee, and then breakfast with way more than 15 grams of protein. So yesterday I went to get cottage cheese.
Okay.
To put cottage cheese in with my eggs, because if you don't get enough protein, and that's why I've been dragging so much in the afternoon. So yeah. So then there's a post-meal walk that compounds this routine and makes it much, much more effective. And that is walking for 15 minutes, 20 to 40 minutes after the breakfast. Why? Well, because blood sugar is climbing toward its maximum, and the muscle contractions pull glucose out of the blood through the gluteus maximus. That's it's the only time your gluteus, your butt, is activated is when you're walking, right? And it's because it's the biggest muscle in the body. It's pulling the most glucose out of your bloodstream while the gut is putting it in. So the spike of glucose, blood glucose, does not reach its full height and then does not accumulate to cause glycation damage because it's burned as fuel. What is glycation damage? If you've seen, I don't know if you, here in the US, we have people making rock candy again you'll see it at craft shows and stuff. And it's got little pearls of the rock candy on the stick. And that's what glycation damage is. Too high of blood glucose in the blood deposits makes rock candy everywhere. And that's what yellows the lens of the eye. Right? So that's glycation damage. So after 50, the insulin pathway that takes care of too much blood sugar in the blood has declined. So that now the glucose from breakfast that cleared within 60 minutes at age 30 now sits elevated for 90 minutes or more at age 60. So post-meal glucose spikes get higher and longer and more damaging as we age. So 3 15-minute post-meal walks control 24-hour glucose dramatically better than 1 45-minute walk any other time of day. The morning walk is the most valuable because the overnight fast has primed the highest spike and the insulin path is at its least responsive. We've got the two ends of the extreme, right? So the walk feeds into every system that the morning routine has already restored, amplifying the compensation. So I changed my schedule this morning because I used to, I drink water, go for my sunrise walk, have coffee, go feed, and then eat. So this morning I did it back. I ate first because when I go feed the animals, then I'm doing the 15 minutes of walking.
Okay.
And I felt good today. It was good. For sure. So now we're going to go into Amish inventions that are smarter than modern tech.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of described that so you mentioned it, so I described it in the description for this live stream and video, where I kind of put it as how it brings us, seeing the example of people that live in a greater autonomy or sovereignty, how we can study them, and that can be a good example for us that are wanting to create a new paradigm of sovereignty. Yeah. So the Amish, we've been looking at them quite a few times.
Yeah.
And we will continue looking at them.
Yeah, we will.
And maybe I'll tell a little bit about a little short Amish story I have of my own.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So we all have a phone, a tablet, and a computer that can connect us to anyone on the planet, and it can translate 100 languages in an instant and more, and we take that all for granted. The Amish don't have any of it. Well, some of them do at certain points, but they don't, not prolifically like we do. And for decades, the rest of us have called that backwards and old-fashioned. But yeah, engineers and sustainability researchers and more have started studying Amish communities. And what they're finding is that most of what the Amish have been doing for 200 years is smarter than by far what we are doing. So what are their inventions and practices that are smarter than modern tech? Well, the first one is barn raising. When a Family needs a barn, the entire community shows up. They show up at sunrise, and by sundown, the barn is standing. They divide the labor by skill. Here's what we do. We hire a general contractor who then hires subcontractors who all operate on separate billing cycles and separate schedules and separate accountability. And so a project that takes 4 months, should take 4 months, takes 14 and longer, and gets incredibly costly to the point where we might call it off and not finish it. The barn raising has zero project management overhead because the community as a whole is the project manager, and every person who swings a hammer or works a saw on that or whatever other their skills are on that barn, they live next to it. They live around it, and you don't cut corners like a general contractor does, right? On your neighbor's stuff. So community labor as infrastructure. And the Amish didn't invent this. They just didn't ever stop using it like we did. Number 2, crop rotation and some regenerative farming practices. Amish farmland that has been worked for a decade, for a century, is in better condition than the neighboring land that went to industrial farming in the 1950s. And they still, they still monoculture, but they crop rotate, and they let some land lie fallow and under. Kitty's just interrupted. So, number 3, root cellars that use Earth's thermal mass to maintain a consistent cool temperature year round. That's refrigeration without a refrigerator. Modern food scientists that are studying sustainable food storage are coming back to root cellars because the refrigerator is one of the most energy intensive appliances. It runs 24 hours a day, and it has moving parts that fail. The root cellar, once it's built, requires almost zero ongoing energy, and it can keep foods fresh for months. Number 4 is the Gelassenheit principle. All Amish are all of German descent, and they all have that. I can guarantee you I wouldn't understand their German, and they wouldn't understand mine, because it's called Pennsylvania Dutch in Pennsylvania. So the Gelassenheit principle roughly translates to a yieldedness to community. In practical terms, it's a decision-making filter. Before adopting new technology or practices, the Amish community asks, how will this affect our relationships, our community cohesion, and our ability to live as free people? Smartphones weren't rejected because they were bad tools. They were rejected because of the unlimited connectivity to the outside that would change the nature of their communities. And the research on what smartphones have done to community cohesion, mental health, and family relationships in the modern world is extensive, and it's all grim. So the Amish have a framework for evaluating things that the rest of us don't. We just adopt things because they are marketed well, and then we spend years figuring out what adopting that actually did to us. The Amish decide in advance what kind of life they want to live, and they filter everything else against that. This isn't backwards, it's actually sophistication. Number 5, draft horse farming. The Amish farmers who use horses instead of tractors produce yields that are better than conventionally farmed land. There's a few reasons for this. Number 1, horses don't compact soil the way heavy tractors do. Tractor wheels pack the ground down, reducing water absorption, killing soil microbes, and making it harder for the roots to penetrate. A horse's hoof is small. Even a draft horse, that's enormous, is small and light by comparison. Number 2, they produce manure, so they're simultaneously a power source and a fertilizer source. A tractor only produces exhaust. A horse produces fertility. Number 3, a horse doesn't need a trip to the dealership. It doesn't have a computer system that throws an error code and stops it from running. And that error code requires a proprietary diagnostic software to clear or to fix it. So If you understand horses, you can maintain them. Number 6, hand-cut dovetail joinery in furniture. Amish furniture is renowned for the reason that it lasts generations. And the structural reason is their hand-cut joinery, because the hand-cut dovetail joints where the wood pieces interlock in a pattern that cannot pull apart mechanically. So the geometry of the joint is the joiner. Number 7, passive solar design. Amish homes are typically, I got kitties being crazy everywhere. Amish homes are typically oriented on an east-west axis with large south-facing windows and minimal north-facing openings. In the northern hemisphere, this means more sunlight enters the home during the winter months when the sun is low, warming the interior naturally. In the summer, when the sun is high, the roof overhangs shade the same windows to keep the interior cool. This was abandoned during the cheap energy period when it was easier to just install a bigger furnace or a air conditioning unit. Number 8, lamps and lanterns. Modern Amish communities use highly efficient pressurized propane lanterns that in terms of lumens per dollar of fuel cost are competitive with electric lighting. And science has shown that communities that rely on natural light cycles maintain circadian rhythms, have better sleep, better daytime energy than those under constant artificial light. Number 9, water-powered grain mills. This is a skill we have to learn. A well-built water mill can run for decades with minimal maintenance. This means no fuel, no grid, no dependency, no emissions. But it requires understanding hydrology and miller design and wheel mechanics to grind our own flour, right? Number 10 is wonderful mental health, lower rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. And researchers have attributed this to several interconnected factors, which are strong social bonds, clear purpose and role in the community. This is the Native American tribes had this in their villages, right? Physical labor, low media consumption, regular community gatherings, multi-generational households, all that reduce isolation. And modern life has gone in the opposite direction. It isolates. Number 11, food preservation. The Amish have always fermented their food. They thought it was just a food preservation technique. We now know it's actually very important for our gut health. And then gravity-fed water systems. A tank or system placed at a high elevation is filled by hand pumps or ram drums. We're going to talk about that more next week. And then water flows through the property entirely through gravity, nothing to fail. And this has been used since Rome, but then we brilliantly started to build plumbing systems around electric pressure pumps, which leads us to power outage and no water. Number 13, timber framing and structures. Modern construction uses dimensional lumber, 2x4s and 2x6s, are nailed together into stud frames and then covered with drywall. It's fast and relatively cheap. The timber frame joins large structural members with wooden pegs and mortise and tenon joints, and we can learn about this from the Japanese too. The old Japanese builders, the old Korean builders too. That distribute weight differently, and so the structures last centuries. Studs warp, screws and nails corrode, drywall cracks, but wooden peg joinery actually tightens slightly as the wood ages and the moisture content equalizes. And then number 14, community accountability for individual decisions, and this is called Ordnung in their version of German. So in our modern societies, major life decisions like where to live, what to buy, how to spend your time are treated as entirely individual. The community has no role, no say. And this is framed as freedom, and in many ways it is. But it also means that when an individual or an individual family experience catastrophe, there's no safety net, there's no help. Amish communities maintain what they call ordning, a set of community agreed on norms for how life is lived. And individuals then are accountable to that community for major decisions. While that sounds controlling, and it somewhat is, Native American tribes also operate it this way. You got kicked out of the village if you weren't working for the good of the entire tribe, right? It means that no one disappears into catastrophes with no one noticing and helping. Modern financial planning, therapy, and life coaching have created an entire industry trying to approximate the function that community accountability or ordinance provides naturally. So again, the Amish didn't invent this, they just never stopped doing it. So we'll look at this. And next week, we're going to talk about a framework of how to get us out, because if we just sit together to decide this with all our domestication, we're going to continue making the same decisions over and over. So we have next week, I'll present a framework from Jacobo Grinberg of how to get beyond our standard decision making. And this is kind of the tone of Attleville communities. We're looking at this wholeheartedly to adopt. I'm not saying we're going to go back to lanterns and lamps. We'll figure something else out. But maybe we will. Who knows? We'll decide as communities. But this kind of gives us a way to look at things.
Okay, so what would be the title for that?
Well, next week we're going to start with the hour-by-hour schedule our body was designed to follow. And then we're going to talk about unlocking our genius consciousness.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And are we going to have a piece of the Taoist arts today?
No.
Okay.
We're going to talk about the one and only law of the cosmos and thus that we need to understand.
Okay.
And this is important because we have a solar eclipse coming up on August 12th that closes out the last 8 years, and 8 years ago on September 17 with the full solar eclipse that arced across Nebraska, I was asking the question, what is my $1 million message? And this is the tone of Attleville's. So this is important. This is the foundation bedrock of our Attleville rapturous tribal life societies.
Okay.
So every problem in our lives, every suffering we've experienced, every pain we carry, and every authority or God that we continue to place over us to continue our suffering and carry pain exists because we have been desperately trying to operate against this only law that exists. The only force that actually operates and governs us, and the only absolute truth that matters. That law is love. And love is not a feeling, it's a force, it's a power. And I've told you this for months, but I haven't known how to present it without sounding silly. Okay. Or like a free love hippie of the 70s. Let's just smoke. Not that I'm dissing any of them.
Yeah.
Right? So everything that appears in our vision, in our eyesight, in our 3D world, as law, is this force interacting through consciousness at different levels of awareness or resistance. Gravity is a derivative of this law. It's not actually a force. Gravity is love expressing as attraction. Electromagnetism isn't a different force. It's love expressing as polarity in every aspect of life. The leaves dropping in the fall, which science calls entropy, is simply love breaking down separation to return to unity. So love is God. And this is the most important thing, because everybody they're not going to admit it. It took me years until just a little bit ago to admit that, oh yeah, I have a belief that there's a white male, two-legged human flesh and blood being in the sky somewhere. Love, and Christians will tell you God is love, but yeah, no, that's as far as it goes. So love is God. Love is not what God does, which Christians will tell you that, right? But love is what God is. And what have we talked about before is the God, the GOD being a acronym for Galactic Organizing Dynamic, or Ordering Dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And since everything is made of God's substance, then, which is love, everything is made of love. The entire universe is formed from love, and it operates through love, and it returns to love.
Mm-hmm.
And a man named Edgar Cayce discovered this through taking naps, where he would become a doorway to the source code of reality, which is love. And he was a good Christian teaching Sunday school, and he expected to find the source of all the rules and regulations that religion provides, and he didn't. He didn't find rules and regulations or judgment and punishments. It was always love expressing itself as everything, including its absence. So when he touched it, it shattered his religious framework.
Wow.
A scientist challenged him on this by asking, well, how can love be a law like gravity? How can it be measured, quantified, and proven? And Cayce replied, well, by life, by growth, by connection and harmony. And what you measure is, you can measure its absence through the discord and separation and the amount of wars. Every scientific law, he went on to tell the scientists, that every scientific law you've discovered is love filtered through different dimensions of expression. Every law is love modified by conditions, like white light modified through the condition of a prism to become different colors. The love is always expanding itself, wanting to know itself through infinite forms and experience. A plant doesn't just choose to grow. This is where we need to, right? We need to come into full awareness, consciousness of this. Love formed it and grows it. A baby doesn't just decide to develop. Love develops them. And the law of growth is that every living thing grows toward light, toward more life, toward greater expression. And what we call evil or darkness is simply love turned against itself by human choice. Hatred is love frustrated. Fear is love contracted. Greed is love misdirected. Violence is love exploded. There is no opposite to love. There is only love that is distorted, love that is resisted, and love that is forgotten. Love is intelligent. It turns pure possibility into potentiality and then actuality. Love doesn't actually create, it informs, right? It informs. It expresses itself, and this is why isolation is death and connection is life. You can't actually violate the law of love. You can most certainly attempt to, and that is what causes suffering. Every form of suffering can be traced to resistance to love. And illnesses then are the body manifesting where love has been blocked, where we've refused to love some part of ourself or our experience. And disease, dis-ease, is literally the absence of the ease that comes from flowing with love. So how does the God substance or love, or as science calls it, the unified field, come to be informed, Ed? And so with that, we go to the I Ching, to China to the east, to China, to the I Ching with its 8 circles for that, as well as the Kybalion. the Hermetic laws, and also science. So Yi, it's not actually I Ching, it's the Yi Jing. Yi means change, and Jing, which is pronounced Jing, actually means canon. So it is the canon or book of change. And why is this so important? Well, because it teaches us, number one, that nature, society, and the individuals all act through cyclical change. And two, the cycles of change are driven by the yin-yang polarity, or the electromagnetic polarity.
Mhm.
Number three, a cycle reaching its zenith descends toward its nadir, so this too will pass, right? And then it ascends again to its zenith. So number four, a cultivated person and enlightened society then act in accord with these cyclical movements and remain aware of the cycles that they instigate every day. Ethical acts then reinforce the community and maintain beneficial cycles, and we have no longer the need for centralized government. Selfish acts increase isolation and generate extreme destructive cycles. Number five, a wise person engages in constant self-cultivation to become more sensitive to change. And number six, cultivated people may feel sad when misfortune occurs, but they are able to use the occasion to seek the distortion of love within themselves. And then number seven, a person who can discern the cycles of life or love can better align with them and be in the flow of ease and be free, disease-free.
Mhm.
And number eight, the knowledge that all endings then are only transitions into a different form. And number nine, the Yi Jing was one of the canons for the imperial governments of China for far longer than the nation of America has been alive.
Wow.
And number 10, it gives us the wisdom to govern ourselves and
Okay.
know that we are made of love.
Yeah.
So, like exiled immortals, we have a memory of a previous paradise that we come as we confront the daily frustration of being human. But we've been taught, as I've said over and over, that we've been kicked out of the garden and doomed. I have cats helping me here with my computer. And doomed to wander the earth and suffer for offending heaven. And we've allowed all kinds of authorities as gods over us, that as we've become so lost in this. But as we turn to the East, traditional Chinese thought is rooted in a profoundly integrated worldview or cosmovision in which heaven, earth, and humanity form an interdependent triad, the Aini, right, known as the three fundamental forces. So the origin, the cosmic black hole, the unified field, let's think of a snake sleeping coils and how they are a circle enclosing an empty center. And in the empty center, all is pure potential, a pure future waiting to explode. An emptiness with a past so unknowable that we cannot name it, and the power so great the future springs from it. The Chinese word for this is Wu Ji, which means no limits. So all of us then begin from nothing, from emptiness, and emptiness is silence that is full of potential. So when we talked about the electromagnetism, the scientists said there's a presence that precedes the electromagnetism, right? Which would be this pure potential waiting for a trigger. That presence, that power, that pure potential is love, as Edgar Cayce discerned it, but it's also called energy. What's in scientific terms? What's the scientific definition of the word energy? The capacity to do work, to transform and change things. So in Chinese thought, Qi is the fundamental and dynamic substance of the universe. It's the God stuff. And it is energy, breath, information, and movement, an invisible vital force only perceptible through its manifestations. So God is love, God is energy or Qi, God is breath, God is information, God is movement, and God is an invisible vital force. So in the source, in Wuji, all is nothingness, empty, silence, pure potential. There can be no consciousness or awareness. All is whole, and there are no events until there is separation. And only with that division, that separation or movement, is there the beginning of all we know. And with the division or separation or movement, there is now consciousness. No one knows what that primordial trigger was. Science hasn't proven anything of what triggered the movement. But we now know it as the orgasmic reflex, right? There has to be a trigger. And I'm also saying it's desire, a desire of the invisible substance to know itself, to experience itself in as many ways, shapes, and forms as possible.
Wow. Okay, quite a load, huh?
Yeah, so consciousness is defined as the ability to have an experience, and yet it's a concept that has scientists baffled, that numerous scientists are still debating on.
Mm-hmm.
And then this brings us to the Hermetic principle in the Kybalion of all is mind and the universe is mental. So the Hermetics call the invisible substance or presence or potential the all, and they believe that everything happened within the mind of it. It's the same with the Chinese. They just didn't have the Tao is the all, the presence. And everything happens within the mind of it. It is infinite through time and space. It can't be added to or subtracted from. It can't be confined or expanded. It's absolute. And scientific studies have shown this to be true. So how can we personalize this? Well, when an architect designs a building, he or she starts imagining it first. So that's the causal realm. The image, mental image, is in the spiritual or love dimension of thought. And through kinetic energy, which is muscle work, it becomes manifest reality.
Wow. Okay.
So the more you love what you do, the more you, and again, love is not a feeling, but when I just love doing this,
Mm-hmm.
you're totally in alignment with the invisible force that is not a two-legged male in the sky that's coming to rapture us. We have to be the source of our own rapture.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the foundation. This is, everything, as I've been telling you, everything stems from love. I just didn't know how to present it until I came across this YouTube video about Edgar Cayce.
Well, it's amazing, yeah. And it's something that we need all these different points of information to bring into a mental map, something that we know is true all inside of ourselves. That's everything's made out of love, but then that is not the system that we're living out there.
No,
that is not what we are told, what we are indoctrinated into is something that is not that. So that's why this is so crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Edgar Cayce's predictions, he was like, humanity has to come to a point where they choose love over fear, love over violence, love over greed.
And we're at that point right now.
Yes, we are.
And that's what we are here. And if anybody here watching this wishes to make that huge jump into that crazy jump out of the cave of fear and into love, then you're welcome to do that with us. You can check out alohainidaleliving.com, our website, or you can check out Freedom Shift, one of our channels, and different social media platforms. And Rumble, we are also Aloha Nidao Living, and we go by those two names in different places. You can join us anytime, and next week we're going to talk about, I like that part of awakening your genius, something like that.
Yeah.
Unlocking your genius.
so we can
And-
design design our new laser show.
Okay.
Because as Bruce Lipton says, when you become like a noble gas, you don't well, like salt, lithium and salt are both highly reactive. They always want to give an electron away, or you don't give away your power, which is what we do. You don't give if you're like a metal like lithium or salt that always wants to give an electron away, you're going to give your power away to authorities like police and politicians and judges and lawyers, right? But you become like a noble gas. You excite others to create a new laser show.
Oh, yeah. Alrighty, so it's going to be very fun, very interesting, and very awakening. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Please subscribe, like, and support us in any way you can. This is completely, for the time being, not being supported by anyone, so you're welcome to do that, or not, at least not supported economically.
Right.
And so you're welcome to start pitching in if you want. And otherwise, we're doing this because of a profound conviction for freedom, and because we understand that somebody's got to step in and do the work.
Yeah.
And here we are doing the work.
We have to move beyond the norm, because we can't continue recreating what's.
Yeah. Cool. So that's amazing. And so, yeah, we'll see each other next week. Thank you for being here. Goodbye.